Hello fellow introverts, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to dive a bit into my lineage. Let me explain to you what Norse paganism is. Now, slowly abandoned when Christianity spread throughout Scandinavia and then forgotten about for centuries, Norse paganism is making a bit of a comeback. But what is this Old Norse religion, and what do its followers believe? And most importantly, should you also become a Norse pagan? Very simply put, Norse paganism is a type of pagan religion. Now, pagan simply means believing in more than one deity. It is also sometimes referred to as heathenry. Norse paganism is based on the Old Norse religion that was practiced in Scandinavia before Christianity showed up towards the end of the 11th, 12th centuries. Followers of Norse paganism believe that life is centered around a vast sacred tree called the Yggdrasil, or the World Tree, which has different realms extended out from it. Humans inhabit one realm, which is known as Midgard, while the other realms are home to multiple gods and goddesses, as well as other beings like giants, dwarves, and elves. It all sounds like something from the Lord of the Rings. You're not a million miles off. Author J.R.R. Tolkien was actually inspired by Norse mythology, and it informed his most famous book, The Lord of the Rings. But dig a little deeper beyond the mythological creatures, and you'll find Norse paganism is actually pretty complex. So while you may have heard about dwarves, elves, and gods such as Odin and Thor, there are many more layers of this religion to uncover. Now, it isn't only scholars and historians who are interested in Norse paganism. In recent years, there has been renewed interest in actually following the religion, with many modern-day pagans delving deep into oaths, learning Norse runes, and welcoming patrons or matron deities into their lives. Norse paganism is an old religion, but also a living one, albeit with a relatively small number of followings in modern times. Unlike the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, Norse paganism is a polytheistic religion. In other words, followers believe in multiple gods and goddesses. These gods exhibit what we might recognize as human traits. The gods argue, make errors, and have flawed personalities, just like us, which explains why Norse mythology can be as compelling as a modern-day soap opera. The gods of Norse paganism can be grouped into two main pantheons. The first pantheon of the Norse deities, the Aesir, which includes gods such as Odin, Thor, and Balder. These gods and goddesses are often associated with social concepts such as war and marriage. The second group of Norse deities, the Vanir, is the most closely associated with fertility, sexuality, and seeing into the future. Freya, for example, is the part of the Vanir pantheon. According to Norse mythology, Aesir and Vanir waged war against each other and eventually merged in one unified group of gods. Beyond those two main groups of gods and goddesses, Norse pagans also believe in Jotuns, who are basically giants, as well as other non-human creatures such as elves and dwarves. Norse pagans typically subscribe to the animistic worldview, that is, a belief that all living things and phenomena have a spiritual essence. Aside from rune stones, like the ones you can see in the museums across the region, there aren't any written text from pre-Christian Scandinavia. There is no Bible to speak of or a specific religious text in Norse paganism, and no list of commandments either. That makes Norse paganism somewhat decentralized and open to interpretation, and there can be significant differences in the way the believers choose to follow the faith. One thing that they can all agree on: when you die, the dead go to different realms, such as Valhalla, where it is said if you die a glorious death in battle, the Valkyrie will choose you to sit with Odin, wait for the final battle of Ragnarok. Things are definitely not as clean-cut as with Christianity, which sees all people in heaven and all bad people in hell. But most agree that there's some kind of life after death, and the afterlife remains an important concept within Norse paganism. As with other religions, there are multiple branches of modern paganism, which all vary slightly in their interpretation and their practice. Some of their main paths of Norse paganism, Astru, is a newish movement that attempts to bring elements of Iceland's pre-Christian religion back into the modern world. Started in 1972, it is now the fastest growing religion in Iceland, with well over 4,000 members. There are 9 noble virtues that followers of the Astru try to live by. First, courage, then truth, followed by honor, fidelity, discipline, hospitality, self-reliance, industriousness, and finally, perseverance. As well as following these 9 virtues and celebrating Norse mythology, the group promotes values like fairness, tolerance, and acceptance. In recent years, though, the symbol of Astru has been co-opted by white supremacist groups that believe that Vikings were a pure race. Like many other things, people adopt symbols from things and change their meaning to fit their own goals and identities, and then they tend to bastardize the true meaning of what they were intended. Next is the Vanatru, sometimes known as the Way of the Vanir. They focus predominantly on the Vanir pantheon, Norse deities which include Freya, Norrun, and Freyr. Third is the Rokatru, which is often considered the dark side of Norse paganism. Followers focus on a third pantheon of deities, the underworld gods. Now, how old is this religion? The earliest roots of Norse paganism are thought to date back to the Iron Age, or even the Bronze Age. And by the time Christ, obvious hallmarks of Norse paganism were beginning to take shape. So, this belief system predates Christianity. However, it was during the Viking Age that Norse paganism truly began to expand its reach, with Norse people setting across large parts of northern Europe. When Christianity spread throughout Scandinavia between the 8th and the 12th centuries, aspects of Norse paganism began to disappear. The Christianization was a slow process that took hundreds of years because the pagans did not want to give up their way of life. And modern archaeological digs have revealed that many people across Scandinavia still clung to their indigenous beliefs long after Christianity had arrived. Yes, they fought wars. They overthrew chieftains. Yeah, it was not an easy transition. Now, quote-unquote, proper Christian practices did eventually take hold in every corner of Scandinavia, including the far north, where the Sami people remained unconverted until the 1700s. Mainly because the Sami tribes are basically what us Americans would know as Alaskans, and what our neighbors to the far east would consider like the Huns. They're small, nomadic, herding tribes of people. But many parts of Norse paganism remain ingrained in Scandinavian folklore. While Norse paganism almost disappeared, parts of it live on. And a renewed interest in Norse mythology, presumably spurred by Marvel movies and Netflix series, have made a new generation of people explore the religion for themselves. Norse paganism isn't an organized religion, so it's hard to know how many followers there are around the world. However, there has been a definite increase in the number of people adhering to Norse paganism in recent years. Google Trends, which we all know is 100% accurate, which reports on how people use their search engines over time, shows a surge in interest in Norse paganism starting in 2018. And in 2019, the BBC reported that the Astru was one of Iceland's largest growing religions. Now, seasonal festivals and their associated rituals are still important to many Norse pagans, including Midsummer, Yule, and Ostra. Some of the Norse pagans also believe in divination and the power of runes to offer guidance, protection, and manifestation. Ancient symbols, such as Thor's hammer and the Vegvisir symbol, are still important to many Norse pagans, though some prefer to focus on the spiritual side of things. If you've seen shows like Vikings, you might be forgiven if wondering if Norse pagans still make sacrifices. Indeed, sacrifice, blot, is believed to have been a very important part of Norse rituals. Now, when we say sacrifice, in this context, it means when you get together to celebrate Yule, which is Christmas, essentially, the sacrifice would be giving best reindeer from your herd, or the best ale or wine or anything you had, not to sacrifice to the gods, but you're giving it to your brethren in celebration. So it's not necessarily like a pagan blood sacrifice, it is giving of something that is yours for the greater good of everybody. Other less gory types of rituals are usually favored instead these days, like offering valuables to bogs or wetlands as a sacrifice, or simply drinking mead. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but drinking was a very special and important thing, only to be done during holidays and celebrations. So the ideas of drunken Vikings laying siege is fallacy. It was reserved for special occasion. Now, for a lot of newcomers to Norse paganism, things start with a casual interest in Norse mythology, and then develop from there. Others may have a family connection to Nordic countries and they feel that they want to explore their spirituality, either instead of or as well as a trip to Northern Europe. In recent years, online DNA tests, which claim to tell people more about their ancestry, have helped lots of people discover that they have a genetic link to the Nordic countries. Sometimes people who have had a difficult experience with more mainstream religions such as Christianity feel drawn to Norse paganism, as it incorporates elements of magic, mysticism, and shamanism. Unlike more mainstream religions, Norse paganism can feel a little niche, inaccessible, and of course, for many people, that is part of the appeal. Many proponents rave about Ryan Smith's book, The Way of Fire and Ice, which acts as a kind of handbook for developing personal practices and building a community around Norse paganism. Published in 2019, it introduces some of the main elements of Norse paganism, including the runes and the 9 realms of Norse cosmology. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, meanwhile, reinterprets old tales in a living way, making the whole subject feel more accessible. Some followers suggest the simplest way to get started in Norse paganism is to simply allow yourself time to connect with the gods, whether it's by meditating or simply taking a walk in nature. Now, the commercialization of my culture. Many people are first exposed to elements of Norse paganism through TV shows and Hollywood movies. This may explain why some followers embrace elements of Viking style. And while Norse mythology and the Viking look portrayed by modern media are undoubtedly intertwined, there is no specific requirement for followers to dress like Vikings, for example, or get a Viking-style haircut. And again, this is not meant to convert anybody. I personally believe that the more informed you are, the better off you are. So take some time, delve into some ancient Nordic texts, read some Eddas, and then consider yourself informed. And with that, I will talk to you nerds later.